Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to episode 13 of the RV Canucks podcast. Are you ready to get your kicks on Route 66? We're so happy you're here with us today. And as always, I am Melina, and I am joined by my husband, Dan. And together with our two girls, a teen and a tween, we are the RV Canucks, lifelong road trippers who travel North America part-time in our travel trailer and talk about how easy it can be to travel an insane amount of miles on your vacations from work and make it relatively stress-free and create memories that will last a lifetime. So welcome back, Dan.
Thank you.
Dan was away last week, so you all had to contend with me talking about haunted places we've stayed, which actually I have really enjoyed reading people's feedback on and hearing some of your stories out there of some kind of cool and creepy places you've stayed as well. But today we are talking about Route 66. This is episode 13 of season 1. Actually, a Route 66 ghost trip would be amazing, but maybe we should plan that for some time in the future. Anyway, Route 66, the Mother Road, America's highway. Although it may no longer be an unbroken stretch of road, the history, the vibe, and the pop culture status of Route 66 remains very much unbroken. That's why we were so excited to choose Route 66 as our first epic cross-continental challenge as RVers. But before we get into our first leg of the journey and how we've broken down the trip over the next few episodes, I have listener mail I want to share. This mail comes from Paula of Popping Two Tops on Instagram, who says, "Hey guys, just listened to your podcast about getting in the miles while traveling. You reinvigorated me for an Arizona trip over Christmas break. I was planning and there's just so much to see and do, and I was feeling 2 weeks isn't enough time, so why bother, you know? Feeling better about it thanks to y'all." And Paula even shares a tip for crossing the vast expanse of Texas, noting, "We live in Louisiana, so getting across Texas takes 15 hours. We've done that 4 times, and Texas doesn't get any better. We've discovered that leaving home at 3 a.m. gets us through Dallas before traffic is a tragedy. Thanks for the great tips. Luckily or unluckily, our boys are grown, so we road trip alone." Well, back to planning that great Southwest Christmas adventure. So thanks, Paula, for writing in. If you want to check out Paula and her husband, Red, they're semi-retired and travel around in their Toyota Tundra and a truck bed camper, and they have some really, really cool adventures. So you can find them on Instagram at Popping Two Tops. That's popping the number 2 and the word tops, or on their blog at poppingtwotops.com. And if you haven't listened to the episode that Paula refers to, or if you're new to the show, it's episode 8. And I think it's one of our most important episodes because it goes through all our traveling tips to lay down more miles efficiently when you have a long way to travel and a short vacation from work. In essence, life is short and we only have so much time in life to make these memories. So don't wish you had. I'll link to that episode in the show notes because those strategies will really come into play as we go through this trip down Route 66. So let's talk a bit about how we laid these episodes out.
We'll call this our Route 66 trip because that was the main focus. But it was actually a trip that looped around, taking us all the way down Route 66, up the coast of California, and back through Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Michigan for a total of 9,496 kilometers or 5,900 miles. This isn't a comprehensive trip guide. This isn't even everything you need to see when you go on the trip, but we'll go into detail with what we saw. But what I would tell you is I don't even think we saw 10% of what we could have seen. There's just so many things that you'll do on the fly that a 10-minute leg stretch just turns into the most memorable event of the day because there's just so much to see. I think it would take us at least 5 trips to see everything that there is to see. And I would tell you, we followed Route 66, but for practical purposes, we jumped on the interstate where we needed to and got onto the original Route 66 to see a lot of stuff. But it doesn't matter where you traveled. It was just an amazing trip. Each episode will detail how far we traveled, how long it took to get there, and we got a little bit better as the trip went on about traveling a little bit more quickly.
For sure.
Noting the things that we saw, what we missed, and what we would change for next time, and a few funny stories along the way.
I think it's probably important, maybe we should touch on some of the inspiration for the trip in the first place, other than the fact that Route 66 is completely iconic in and of itself. But we're massive Disney fans. We spent a lot of time at Walt Disney World. I grew up on the West Coast going to Disneyland. Our kids grew up literally with the movie Cars, and it's probably still their favorite Disney movie that has ever been produced. And if you have the DVD of Cars, there's actually a bonus at the end of the movie, and it's kind of like a mini documentary where, John Lasseter and all of the Cars Imagineers and all of the designers and all of the storytellers, and they talk about the real life inspiration they pulled from Route 66 when they made the movie Cars. And I'm sure you could probably get it on Disney Plus too if you don't have a dusty DVD sitting in your house. But really seeing that mini documentary kind of really pointed out some really cool, neat things that they kind of pulled brick for brick from real life and recreated in that movie. So a lot of our goals were to see a lot of those things that kind of popped up and appeared in the movie Cars. And there's a lot of ways you can do Route 66. It might be like you like big neon signs or like massive statues of Paul Bunyan or, whatever it is. There's 1,000 different ways to do Route 66, but that was kind of our focus. So you'll kind of see themes of that as we go through. So let's dive in.
Okay, so I think day one is a pretty basic day. It was the last day of school, so the girls went to school for half of the day just to say goodbye to their friends, and they came home at lunch, just tidy things up, get the last couple dishes washed in the rack, load the last few things that needed to be done, and we hit the road and left at noon. So we crossed the border in Sarnia, which is Port Huron on the U.S. side, just north of Detroit, Michigan, and we drove on to the Pilot Flying J at Lake Station, Illinois. Indiana.
Lake Station, Indiana.
And that was, so this is a really interesting, this is not the world's biggest truck stop, not the flashiest truck stop relative to, hey, car travelers or RV travelers. I'm sure there's a big spot in the back for the trucks, but the actual footprint of the store is relatively small to some of the ones that we went to. By far, some of the most friendly people we've ever run into. So we pulled in. I think we were the first trailer pulling in for the night, but there's not a lot of sites there.
There was like 2 trailer spots. And it's actually, I double checked on the Flying J app. It's not even advertised. It's advertised as RV friendly in terms of like there's a dump station and there's RV lanes for fueling, but they aren't advertising RV parking spots, which are the overnight parking spots. So I think actually we called ahead to maybe double check. And I think this is one of the times, like sometimes if you call ahead and they're not busy, they'll just like run outside and say like, yep, there's an open spot right now, but I can't guarantee you when you get here in 3 hours that it'll be there. So there is only 2 spots at this one, but it was a fantastic place to stay because it did have that full service Denny's.
Yep. And so we knew that we would be able to park when we got there. We left early enough to make sure that we get in early enough in the evening that we wouldn't be the last person coming in because it is first come, first serve. When we got there, was a little unsure about where we parked. And this is the first big tip I'd tell you. I just went in, went up to the gas counter, spoke to the supervisor, asked where we could park, and she sent somebody out to just double check with us, walked us right out, said, yep, you're fine to park there, and we were good. Couple things to note: the light post that goes high up into the sky actually has a power hookup. Unfortunately, we didn't find out about that till the next morning when the fellow beside us said, hey, did your power go out last night? So word to the wise, and something we do now is if you're parked beside a post, you might find that there's 15 amp service right beside you at the trailer. We went into Denny's, got a nice sit down meal, nice and quiet, got everybody fed up and rested. Interesting little, I think this is maybe the first of the little things that you pick up along the way that you remember. We found out that in America, there's 2 types of gravy. There's white gravy and brown gravy. Because they asked Isla, what kind of gravy would you like for your potatoes? It's like, white or brown? And this became an actual event at the dinner table where they actually brought out samples of gravy.
Gravy samples for us to try, like we were tasting wedding cake. It was funny.
But it was great. That's the fun. That's the little things that you remember. She was a little bit younger then. She tried the gravy, picked her dinner, and we had a great night that night.
So the way I would explain it for Canadians, obviously Americans are probably like, duh, yeah, white gravy. But white gravy is more like kind of like a cream sauce, I guess, that you would put on, that you could have it with biscuits or something. And then obviously brown gravy is like fry gravy, what we would use as gravy.
Couple other things I'd say. Crossing the border into the U.S., we've never had trouble. We've done it dozens of times. Couple things I'd just tell you. If you're traveling from Canada to the United States, don't have groceries in your rig. Don't have vegetables. Don't have fruit. Meat. Generally what we do is, hey, we'll have coffee and maybe leftover food in the, just from lunch or snacks or something. We'll pull into the duty free. Everybody uses the washroom because you never know how long you're going to be in the line. Ditch your garbage, pull up to the booth, and the U.S. Border Patrol is by far just the friendliest people we've ever met. Having a couple young kids in the back puts them in a good mood. They chat us up, and I don't think we've ever been slowed down at all. But, just having a nice organized vehicle gets you through the border a whole lot quicker.
Mm-hmm. Now, that said, when you're going opposite and coming back to Canada, like the difference is stark with what you can bring across the border in terms of like
into Canada
versus into the US. Like, so pretty much we're at that point where, you know what, usually groceries are cheaper anyway, even with the exchange, I'm finding. So we don't bring anything over. We do our grocery shopping on the US side. But coming back into Canada, the allowances, if you actually look them up on the Canadian Border Services website, the allowances are quite large. So like if it's prepackaged meat that's like labeled from a grocery store, or cheese or dairy or whatever it is, the only thing they're stingy on is alcohol. Like no matter how long you're gone, you can only bring back like 750 milliliters of wine, which is like 2 regular size bottles, which is ridiculous. But because the liquor is a whole lot cheaper in the US than in Canada. But as far as food goes, we tend to bring a lot of groceries back because there's a lot of things we can find in the States that we don't find in Canada. So that's kind of our little, I guess, border rule going one way or the other.
Yeah, maybe that'll be another episode, the fun little thing. So day 2, Lake Station at the truck stop. We get up, we go into the truck stop. I think we had breakfast again at Denny's, hit the road with full bellies. And so we pick up Route 66 on I-57 just south of Chicago. And, I suppose the purist would want us to start at the sign in downtown Chicago, but Melina and I felt that staying married and happy was better than taking a 50-foot trailer rig combo down through downtown
Chicago. Yeah, we chose the path of happiness over instant divorce.
Right. So we left Lake Station. We traveled about 2.5 hours to Funk's Grove rest stop on I-55 just south of Bloomington in Normal, Illinois.
I think this is a really cool rest stop. So this was a couple of hours after we left. We were ready to have lunch. So we had actually gone grocery shopping. We had made up some boxed lunches. We had some pasta salad sandwiches and whatnot. And this rest stop, it's just like a state-run rest stop on the side of the highway, which if you listen to us, that we love. They're immaculate. They're clean. And this one actually had a cool little hiking trail through the woods behind the rest area, and we just sat there. It was a really beautiful day. We had a picnic. We took our time. We really stretched our legs. We took a walk through the trail. But the great thing about this rest stop is there was a ton of like plaques and maps and all kinds of like historical information just out in the park that you could read. And it talked about, the road westward and like covered wagon days and the advent of Route 66. So we got a huge like history lesson about Route 66 right at that rest stop, which was really cool for the kids to kind of see. We can kind of explain. And then that made sense because as you head westward from that point on in Illinois, you start to see a lot of like old Route 66 stuff pretty quickly, like old gas stations that have been restored and old water towers. And there's a lot of places where you can veer off onto old Route 66. So that was a really good place to stop this rest area, just in terms of getting information of a historical nature to kind of aid us as we continued on.
Yep, and it just got us all refreshed and ready to hit the road again. Another little funny story, we pulled into a huge truck stop this time to refuel. Just the biggest truck stop you've ever seen, at least if you're a Canadian in Ontario. And, there's a 10-year-old boy inside all of us, and I was just so giddy to be at this truck stop. And I pulled into the RV lines, and I was filling up. And this old Pontiac Aztec came rolling in, muffler dragging off the ground, and I kind of just kept to myself. And this fella hops out and pulls up his shirt and starts pumping gas and putting speed stick deodorant on, and then yells over to me, "Thanks for coming down here. We're really happy that you're here." And it was just the friendliest guy, certainly a little bit unique as he pulled it up to the pumps, but just, I think we lost track of the number of times on that trip where people came up to us, went out of their way to say just welcome for traveling, or thank you for traveling and welcome to wherever it was we were. Just made it so much easier, so much more welcoming and de-stressful.
For sure. And I think this is probably a good time to mention, when I said there's a lot of places to veer off onto old Route 66, like McLean, Illinois and Atlanta, Illinois are two really good, well-preserved parts of old Route 66. But like I said at the beginning of the episode, it's not an unbroken road anymore, right? So the majority of Route 66 is going to be the I-40, which you catch like past St. Louis, and that kind of takes you westward. And then you jump off all the time. Like you will go off on exits to hit old Route 66. And that section might be like a downtown core with some really good like restored neon signs and stuff. And it might only be like 1 or 2 miles long, and then you're back on the interstate again. But one of the things we did is we bought a guide on our trip, and we actually didn't pick up this guide until halfway along the trip at the Midpoint Cafe, but I wish we had pre-ordered it before we left. And it's called the Easy Route 66 Guide for Travelers, and it's by Jerry McClanahan. And this thing is like the most boring looking book. It's like a coil bound, black and white illustrated, like it's not flashy at all. But man, is it ever packed with information. Like this thing will tell you like 80% of original Route 66 is actually still there, but it's not well signed. Sometimes you have to pull off. Sometimes you have to go quite a ways off the interstate to find old Route 66. So this guidebook tells you, and it's kind of cut up into zones where you'll have maps, and it will tell you where you can pull off and where you can't. One of the best things we have found about this guide is it also has like trailer and RV warnings. So it will say, you know, if you have a trailer longer than 24 feet, you are not going on this old part of Route 66. So don't even try, because you're going to get stuck and you can't turn around. So this guide was super invaluable into discovering the old parts of Route 66. And I mean, we did a lot of hopping off the interstate as much as we could to kind of travel some of these old areas, which we'll talk about. But this guide, if you are even considering doing Route 66, I will link up to it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at pretty much any of the visitor shops along Route 66, but it is the definitive guide to have with you.
If you're thinking about getting this book to plan for a trip, I'd encourage you to order it over the winter so you can thumb through it, because it's literally the Google of Route 66. Makes planning the trip just so much easier. So I'd say order it well in advance so that you've got it, and just keep it in the glove box once you hit the road. Mm-hmm. So I think that, gets us kind of heading back down the road. After lunch, we pushed through St. Louis down to Marshfield, Missouri. I think once we got to St. Louis, there's tons of stuff to see. There's these pyramids just outside, just
like
north.
Kind of like, yeah, they're like grass mounds kind of just outside St. Louis. Like you can see them from the city, from the arch almost.
Yeah, and we kind of saw one, and then we saw another, and we wondered what they were, and Melina Googled them, and I think they were Aztec pyramids.
They're like an Aztec type, pyramid almost that have been there for literally millennia. Like it's just the coolest thing, and they're just sitting kind of right on the outskirts of St. Louis. So we found a lot of stuff like that we didn't even know, even through all of our research. And we used road trippers extensively to plan this trip, and that's one of the things I've been using to help plan this. Because this trip was in 2018, I saved the trip. I save all our old trips on Road Trippers, and I actually went back to it to kind of reference where we stopped, addresses, things we had seen, and then some of the things we had seen kind of last minute that we added in or we decided to stop at last minute. But yeah, there's tons of stuff. No matter how much research you do, you're still going to pass something on the road and be like, oh wow, I wonder what that is. So we already have a running list of stuff we want to see the next time we go and do this trip again.
Yeah, and we were getting into the end of the day, into St. Louis, and probably into rush hour, maybe just before supper time. And, this is not St. Louis's fault, but Dad makes a wrong turn, which takes us into a bit of a rundown industrial area, which brings us to a bridge.
Like a train bridge, that was underpass.
Yeah, and it was kind of a bit sketchy, so to say. And it was signed at 13 feet 9 inches, but it could have been shorter. It could have been taller. I think that sign went up many, many years ago. But we kind of held our breath as we went underneath, because I wasn't really sure if the truck and the trailer was going to fit, because, I had all the best intentions of measuring it, but I didn't. But fortunate we made it through with no problems. But
we're 13 feet like 6 inches. We had like inches to go before knocking our air conditioner off on this underpass, but there was nowhere else for us to go.
But in any case, word to the wise, don't make the mistake I did. Go get your trailer measured, so you know how tall you are while you're traveling down the road. And then I think we just pushed on through to Marshfield, Missouri, and pulled off. And I think by that point in 2018, there was a heat wave. And that's when we really realized from RV Parky that $25 to pull off at an RV park at the side of the road.
Super worth it if you want your air conditioner.
You had air conditioning, you had sewer, you had water. It was nice and clean, secure. Called ahead, unlike Ontario where they want your name, your phone number, a Visa card. we got told, hey, you're on site 13. If we're not here when you get here, just pull in and settle up in the morning for $25. Best money we ever spent. The other thing I'd tell you, as much as we love boondocking, $25 at an RV park and you can eat what's in the fridge is a whole lot cheaper than 2 meals at Denny's restaurant.
Mm-hmm. And we've gone over this a ton. Like, I feel like we're probably repeating ourselves, but if people don't catch every episode, that's why we mention it, because these are the super important tips. We stopped at the RV Express 66 RV park. This is the park that Dan's talking about where they saved us the site. And it was actually fantastic because we were in need of gas and we were in need of groceries. So what we did was we just pulled in. It was like 9 or 9:30 at night. The kids wanted to get to bed. So we just pulled in and unhooked. And I went and got groceries and then Dan went later and got gas as I was unpacking the groceries. So it was a really great way because we had everything right on our doorstep because we were essentially still on the interstate that we could just do that. And then we didn't need to worry about finding a gas station in the morning with our rig. We just kind of hopped in and hit the road.
Right, we were right beside the interstate, but I don't think it kept any of us awake at night. So day 3, we leave Marshfield, Missouri, and the end of the day is in Elk City, Oklahoma. So we went from Marshfield to Galena, Kansas, which means we're hopping off the interstate. It's about 173 kilometers, about 110 miles or so. And we went to cars on Route 66 in this small little town, which was one of the inspirations for the movie. And that was just a nice, neat little spot to see stuff, that we hadn't really seen, just a different part of America. And I think that's when the scenery started to change.
So the character of Tow Mater in Cars actually came from this town because they have this old rusty tow truck that somebody had stuck eyes on years ago and made it into that is what now the original Tow Mater. And since then they've added, an old fire truck and a police car and, different various characters from Cars. And they've really kind of capitalized on the whole Cars thing. But it's kind of a cool little town. You're really looking into the past. It is a rundown little town. I don't even know how many people. I should probably look up the population because I don't know how many people live there, but we saw nobody on the streets. It was just almost like a town stuck in time.
Just short of a ghost town, really.
Yeah, it was really neat though. It was really cool. So we kind of browsed part of the downtown, did some window browsing and saw the cars on Route 66. And then we just decided to stay on old Route 66 for a little bit. So we went about 13 kilometers, 7 miles down to Baxter Springs. And there's actually a really great regional museum in Baxter Springs, but we did not have time to stop there. So that's something, again, that we want to go back and see. But I know my parents have been there and they say it's a fantastic, fantastic museum. And some of these really small, regional museums are the best bang for your buck that you're ever going to get. But in Baxter Springs, what we did stop and do was we went to the Monarch Pharmacy and Soda Fountain. So this is it's a modern building, but it's made to look like your old, pharmacy / pop shop / soda fountain where they have the stools, and the ice cream was fantastic. And we just had a good, nice break, got some ice cream, and we were all rejuvenated. And then we finished kind of that jaunt on Old Route 66 and then got back on the interstate just after Baxter Springs.
Yep. So then we push on about another 500 kilometers, about 320 miles to Elk Creek RV Park for the night, because again, here we are, it's a whole lot easier to pay $25-$30 hook up water, electricity, and sewer and get nice and comfortable. So that was really nice.
This was also the first RV park we've ever been to that had a storm shelter.
Yes, indeed. I think the country is starting to change. The things that, we get worried about how much snow we're going to get in the winter, and they get worried about tornadoes and such. I think, the first 2 or 3 days of this trip is where our family also got into podcasting because I'd kind of listened to a few podcasts. People have been talking about it at work, but none of it, I don't think anybody else had. And Isla was about 9 years old, and anybody who knows Isla knows that she needs a lot of exercise. And so we were kind of building up her endurance. And, the first day she gets a little squirrely in the back seat, like a caged animal in the back. And I pop on a podcast, and it was probably some boring podcast on running and nutrition and protein. And she settled right down. And that was just kind of cool for her to listen to something. And the next day, just like clockwork, at 2:00 in the afternoon, she starts to go squirrely. We pop on a podcast, and that helped us pass the time. So we learned that in the first 2 or 3 days, which helps you get down the road a little quicker, especially if you got kids.
Now, I will say, I know that when we went to Elk City, we actually planned on staying at a municipal park that also had camping, but they were full. So we used RV Parky to find somewhere to stay. And there's a lot of places to stay. So I was never worried about not finding somewhere. But a lot of like the absolutely fantastic, like 4 and 5 star places were taken. So this one had like a 3-star rating. But you know what? It was dated and it was old, but they did their best, I would say, to keep it fairly clean. And we were only there for one night. I don't even know if we unhooked, did we? I don't think
we needed to. We pulled in late in the evening. We're leaving first thing in the morning. There was really no reason to unhook. Because we got up the next morning. I don't think we drove too far, maybe an hour tops, 2 hours. And we went to the Oklahoma National Route 66 Museum.
That was in the same city. We drove like 5 minutes to get there.
So we drove 5 minutes. We drove 5 minutes. We were at the Oklahoma National Route 66 Museum. It was a Sunday. It was closed, but the parking was open. It's an outdoor museum, kind of a recreation with, the Opera House and the general store and some trains. And we just walked around and looked at it ourselves. Too bad, we kind of didn't know about it beforehand because being Sunday it was closed, and we probably would have liked to have been there when it was open. But good example of those things where you just dive off the highway because you found something cool.
Yeah. And we had pre-planned to go there, but kind of especially in the summertime in tourist seasons, like even on a Sunday, anywhere we have ever traveled, things like that have been open. But clearly we're like getting into Bible Belt area, and everything was closed on the Sunday. So that was a little unfortunate. But like Dan said, it was an open air museum. So we could kind of browse around and make the best of it. But it would have been really cool to see and to be able to go into some of these buildings. But it went through everything from like, pioneer days. There was a memorial to like cowboys there. There was, trains and the first radio station that got brought in. Like it really takes you through the ages up until the current age. And it was a really cool place. So I would definitely go back again. Just maybe don't go on a Sunday. So really, I would say from this point on, the trip gets really interesting. We saw so much between Oklahoma and California that it was hard to imagine when you look back and see all of the places that we stopped, that they were just, a couple minutes here, an hour here, or just 5 minutes off the road here. But this episode here just kind of sets up, like you got to get through the normal stuff, the stuff you've been through, the boring stuff to get to the super, super good stuff. So we knew at this point, like we woke up, day 4 and we knew we were going to see some pretty awesome stuff from here on out. So I would just say as we head into the rest of this series, we're going to do leg 2 next week, which we are going to cover pretty much from Elk City all the way to Williams, Arizona. And then leg 3 is going to cover California and Nevada. And then leg 4, we've looped around and we went through Nevada on our way back. We're going to cover Moab to home again in episode 4. So tons of stuff to see. And I would just say, as you follow along, if you're planning a trip like this, stick around for the rest of the legs because it gets really interesting from here on out. And don't be afraid to hop off the interstate.
Yeah, and don't feel like you got to do this whole thing in one go. If you just want to do a part of it, just go do a part of it. It'd be so cool and amazing.
And here's the thing. Like if you decide you only want to do the section we did, there's probably some really cool, amazing things you can see between Illinois and Oklahoma. You could probably make a vacation just out of that if you actually look for the things like all of the stops or just want to follow 100% old Route 66. And then the next time you bust past all of that stuff and then you do the next leg and come home and then you do the furthest leg, so there's really no right way to do it, but it's definitely doable.
Absolutely.
All right. So check in with us next week as we head from Elk City, Oklahoma, all the way through to Williams, Arizona.
Talk to you later.
Bye.